All right, we are back, and there's a lot to talk about. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. Event number 7, the Final Cut Pro on the 2025 WSL Championship Tour season. It's actually the Western Australia Margaret River Pro, is a wrap with Durban's Jordy Smith and Kauai's Gabriela Bryan securing their second event wins of the 2025 season. Next up is the first post-cut event. It is the Lexus Trestles Pro presented by Outerknown. It's going to start on June 9th. But first, Mitch, man, the Aussie treble's over. How are you feeling? How are you feeling post-Margaret River?
Yeah, I mean, really stoked on the outcome of the trio events, obviously. But, just looking at the rankings right now, that's what I'm really most stoked about. Top 5 on the men's side. If it were to end today and we'd qualify people for the Lexus WSL Finals in Fiji, we'd have 3 new members on the men's side. We have Jordy Smith. Obviously, his first time ever, he's leading the rankings by almost 5,000 points right now, which is a big deal. It's been 8 years since he's been leading the rankings. You have Yao Godor right now at number 3, who everybody wants to see compete over there in the finals. And Baron Mamiya, finally, this year, 2 results outside of Hawaii, Dave, and they're both semifinals. Really stoked for him. On the women's side, obviously, Gabby Bryan, she continues to be stellar. But surprisingly enough, first time ever in Jordy Smith's career that he's won 2 events within the same season. Same thing for Gabby Bryan. Obviously, a much smaller sample size for her, only her 4th season on the championship tour. But look at this. They have won 2 events in the same season, and they won both the same events. How trippy is that? It's just crazy, especially considering, that they're leading the rankings right now, and they're looking good heading into lowers.
Yeah, the planets are in alignment for those 2 at the moment. And, we've been catching up a lot, right? Because the treble, we had Bells Beach and then Burleigh Heads and then Margaret River. Yeah. Pretty awesome 3-event run. Really impressive performances. We're going to dig into it. So why don't we get into winners and losers from the Western Australia Margaret River Pro, Mitch. You start first. We'll start with our losers, and then we'll go into winners.
Yeah, I mean, it's the men's top 5. Outside of Jordy, really nobody was able to make it past the round of 16. Kanoa still had a real good event. He was leading, actually, GWM Aussie treble for the majority of it. Finaled over there at Bells Beach. Did very well in Burleigh Heads, and considering that was a wildcard event, obviously for him, make it into the semis was a major moment. He's top 5 at the moment. Outside of that, though, Ethan Ewing, Felipe Toledo, who was at number 6, they both lose out in the round of 32. This was a disappointing event for them, obviously, but most importantly, everybody that was still looking to trek up in the rankings, including Jack Robinson, not really the result they were looking for. And with few events left, Dave, I mean, not a ton of room to make up right here, especially considering the event we're going into. Yago, Jordy, all these guys are high-performance surfers. Everybody should be able to compete over here in Southern California.
It's a really good point, right? Because this is the first year that the rhythm of the season's changed in a few years with that cut moving back. I think previously when it was at 5 and 5, it's like, okay, well, everyone that makes it, it's a little bit of a reset. Obviously, you carry your results from the first half of the season into the second half, but there's a lot of runway to make up. This time it's not, it's relatively a short runway. And, similarly for me, my first loser coming out of WA might seem like a strange one, but Ethan Ewing, it's been relatively quiet across the Australian events, right? I mean, for someone that most core surf fans and most CT surfers consider one of the best surfers on the planet, especially when it comes to rail surfing, especially when it comes to forehand rail surfing, his results across Bells, Burleigh, and Mainbreak were a 5th at Bells, but then a 17th and a 17th. He's dropped just outside the top 5 following the Aussie treble to number 6. And, is this bad? No. Does this make him a loser? Absolutely not, despite my use of him in this section. The point is, though, someone like Ethan was arguably the favorite to win not 1, not 2, but all 3 Australian events, and had a decent showing at Bells, but certainly came up shorter than expected at Burleigh Heads and Margaret River. And that obviously happens at this level, but heading into the post-cut venues of Lower Trestles, Saquarema, Jeffreys Bay, and Teohopu, I don't think he'd be considered the favorite at all the venues like he was across the treble. So potentially a missed opportunity for Ethan competing in his home country. But it's another thing, it's not just him, but most of the surfers at this level, they always seem to be more dangerous when the spotlight is focused on others instead of them. So we'll see how he goes. Lower Trestles, I mean, any of those venues he could do damage at. I think Lower Trestles and Jeffreys Bay in particular, it'll be exciting to see what he comes up with.
Well, if you look at the next 3 events, he's finaled at all of them. He hasn't competed in a regular season format over there at Lowers, but was runner-up to the World Championship back in 2023 at the venue in Southern California. That's a major positive, especially with his power surfing. He brings a completely different brand and perspective to what we're normally accustomed to seeing over there at Lower Trestles. He's made the final in Brazil, which is a huge moment for him. Of course, outside of Australia, you mentioned there's really no other place pressure-wise to compete like that in Saquarema. I mean, the crowd over there is just monumental, and, hoping to see him have a major bounce back, especially with the victory that he's already had at J Bay. I mean, that's a major one. Consider the people who have won there. We're only talking about the very best of the very best, and especially with his rail surfing, I'm not necessarily preoccupied, but you shouldn't have to wait until the last minute, especially with Tahiti being the last event to qualify before the Lexus WSL Finals. My second loser, I think it's a pretty noticeable one, and just looking at the women's rookie class, outside of Aaron Brooks, no true rookie was able to make the cut. And Aaron lost a really close heat to Luana Silva, who has just been on a tear since Bell. She's made the final over there. She did very well. And actually for Lulu, this is the first time she's made the cut, so congratulations to her as well. But losing Vahine Fierro and, of course, Bella Kenworthy, we're going to see them in 2026 due to the 11-14 mark on the women's CT. They're automatically requalified for the next season fully. But I really wanted to see them both compete in the back end of this year, especially at Lowers. I feel like Bella right there, despite the injuries that she's had, she's a local surfer, has a lot of experience competing there at her home break. And, of course, for Vahine, it was the opportunity to see her really at some of the premier breaks. And, I think Lower Trestles would be exceptional for her, but I wanted to see her compete at Jeffreys Bay. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen right now in 2025, but it will happen in 2026. But congrats to Erin. I think most of us did pick her to be Rookie of the Year, and it seems like she's going to be that at the end of the season, Dave.
Yeah, it's a really good call. And I think Vahine and Bella are really, really worthy surfers as well. And look, sometimes you get to the CT at different levels in your career trajectory. Sometimes you come on too early. Sometimes you come on at the right point. Sometimes you come on later than you anticipated. I think with both Vahine and Bella, they're going to have long CT careers moving forward. They absolutely have the tools. You called out Bella's injury. She still performed really, really well across those first 7 events. And Aaron Brooks is obviously someone who's been on our radar for quite a while. That just is, I think her season just kind of shows how tough it is at the CT level. She skinned into the cut, barely made it in there. And so it's tough. And I think that now the pressure's off for her. It'll be interesting to see how she goes loosening up across those next 4 events. So on the topic of goofy footers, that is the second loser coming out of the West for me. Before we get to the bad, I want to start with the good, though, right? We've got Japan's Connor O'Leary, great run to the quarterfinals, bumped up 5 spots on the rankings from 19th to 14th. Caroline Marks, not the result she wanted, but still moved up 1 spot in the rankings. It's just magic math, who knows? Ian Gouveia moved up 1 spot, still didn't make the cut. Special shout out to the wildcards in Bronte McCauley and Jacob Wilcox, who finished 3rd and 5th respectively, showing all the right foot forward crew it can be done. Really impressive. But the Goofy Collective on tour, which I counted 16 across the men's and women's fields, they lost a cumulative 9 positions on the CT rankings at the Western Australia Pro. So not good, Mitch. I was going to ask you, though, you surfed the right-hander at main break on your backhand, right? What are your thoughts on that kind of wave and approaching it as a goofy footer?
It's a really difficult wave, and then when you add in, the biggest curveball of all, being over, to adjust on the fly over there at the box, I think the only wave that I can truly recall where I saw somebody paddle out literally for the first time ever in their life over the box as a goofy footer is Italo's high 7. That was in 2019. That was still incredible, and unfortunately for him, it was the first heat of the morning, and they couldn't drop a 10 that quickly. But main break's obviously one of those waves that demands a lot out of you. It's not perfect, and it tends to shift around a lot, as we saw during this event. We had multiple swells in the water, a lot of big days too. But this is really one wave that I think really just demands physicality. And we saw Italo struggle. He's done well in the past. We saw Iago struggle. He had already done well in the past too. But you mentioned Connor O'Leary. I think power v power right here really matched itself well, and that's why he was able to get the good result. Also, you mentioned Jacob Wilcox. Major shout out to that kid. After being a victim of the cut last year on the championship tour, he bounced back and was sick in the opening round, I knew something was off. I mean, he competed so poorly in the opening round. I was just thinking to myself, I've never seen you surf this bad in New Jersey. And then elimination round comes over, and he was a different dog. And, he mentioned being sick. He just looked so much better. But, that's actually my third loser. It's the overly patient surfers here at both main break and the box. And I think it's what you're mentioning about the goofy footers. They're looking for a certain type of wave that regulars don't look for, something much bowlier and probably shorter just because you want to go top to bottom twice in a row. For a regular footer, you can really surf those waves that are stretched out just a little bit more. But if you look at Kanoa, if you look at Barron, and if you look at, of course, both Gabby and Jordy, they were very, very smart in terms of activity. But want to focus on Barron right here. Both at main break and at the box, if you look at his high wave count per heats, he was not only in control of the lineup, he was actually searching for most of his waves. And I feel like at this location, especially with the overlapping heat formats that we did have for a few rounds, this is something key, Dave. It's something key. You can't be necessarily waiting out the back thinking, okay, this wave's for sure going to come in the 40 or 30 minutes that I have out there. It didn't for a lot of them, including Al Cleland Jr., who after making the cut, the next heat over at main break, he waited for close to 30 minutes without even catching a wave. And I think it's just a testament of why this event is on tour and why it's the event where the cut line was. And, truly proud of everybody that was able to compete super well. But, yeah, you become too patient out there and it works against you.
It's a really good note on just the rhythm of competing in Western Australia. My final loser coming out of Margaret River, unfortunately, it's our friends at Channel Islands. They lost 6 surfers to the mid-season cut. Matthew McGillivray, George Pitar, Imai Kalani DeVault, Vahine Fierro, Bella Kenworthy, and Brisa Hennessy, leaving only Baron Mamiya, Zhao Xianca, and Lakey Peterson to fly the Hexes banner at lowers and beyond. So that's a 66% reduction on the CT field for those guys. To be fair, of course, while Vahine, Bella, and Brisa didn't make the cut for the back portion of the 2025 CT season, they did make the cut already for 2026 with the women's field increasing to 24 surfers. So that's a positive. The other thing, too, when you look at those 6 CI surfers that didn't make the cut, they are all legitimate CT talents that will likely have long careers at this level for years to come. You got Matty McGillivray can get 10s at Chopu, is finaled in El Salvador. George Pitar, unofficial lineup team rider. He wowed as a wild card last year and definitely has the tools to deliver on the CT. Imai is one of the most stylish and unpredictable surfers on the planet. We just haven't really seen that translate to CT competition yet. Vahine, as you mentioned, has already won a CT as a wild card, and Bella put in a really impressive rookie performance across 7 events, and Brisa, 2-time WSL finalist and CT winner. So it's a hugely impressive batch of surfers that we're sad to see go, but we'll see some of them on the Challenger Series, and as I mentioned, we'll see some of them back on the CT in 2026.
Yeah, and that's obviously a big hit for them too, but if you look at the rankings on the women's side, you mentioned Vahine, Bella, and Brisa. They finished 12, 13, and 14 respectively. So fortunately for them, at least they did make the cut for next season. That's a major thing. And of course, you're just going to have to rebrand and remarket things for the upcoming season. But focus on the people that you do have on the Championship Tour as of right now. And we all know Britt. We all know Brent Power, the team manager for Channel Islands. Those guys are still on land for every single big QS event and Challenger Series event. So you're going to see them over at Newcastle for that first Challenger Series of the season, that actually goes straight into one of my winners. And I would actually put her as the top winner in the event, and that's Lakey Peterson. An inspiring performance. And of course, I think with the longevity that she's had on the Championship Tour, it just goes to demonstrate that there is a capability of everybody that's qualified for the CT in the past to still adjust and adapt on the fly. She ascended, Dave, 6 spots. She was down to number 16, literally outside of the cut line even for 2026, making it to the semis right here, moved up to number 9. And, despite not making it into the final, this is a huge performance by her. Not only that, outside of the 2 semifinals that she had right here and at the beginning of the season, she was really having many throwaways. So for her to be able to do it in a must-win scenario, obviously very inspirational, but more than anything, I would be saying motivating to everybody else who's looking to put themselves in that kind of position too, especially the people that are going to be coming up in the Challenger Series in a few weeks in Newcastle.
Yeah, I think she is a hugely deserving winner coming out of WA. Like so raw and like candid, also like in sharing her thoughts. At this point in her career, I've had the good fortune knowing her pretty closely for a long time, and even when I saw her on the Gold Coast briefly, we were talking, and I just said, when I watch you surf, like especially in free surfs, it's like you are surfing faster and better than you've ever surfed. So I think her ceiling, at this point in her career, which doesn't always happen, is higher than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
I think translating that to heat surfing, we don't always see it, and that's not very common in a veteran who's been around for a number of years. Usually you see that gap shrink, but I just think there's a lot of positives seeing her dig deep in Western Australia, and also just the macro point of like, she is surfing better than ever. With the pressure off, I'm excited to see what kind of momentum she brings to Lower Trestles, because it's sort of her adopted hometown wave. Her and her husband live there now. It was always down the road from, her original home in Santa Barbara, and she just has a ton of experience there. So hopefully you get a good swell, and I'm excited to see what she does there. Kind of related, my first winner from Margaret River, power surfing, right? As a concept, and I think as exhibited by the winners, Jordy Smith and Gabriela Bryan. Obviously, Griffin's 10 and Katie's super innovative lines, very, very impressive in their own right. But that rail in the water, high speed foundational surfing seen by the event winners truly won the day, won the event there. And it's interesting, like, I think there's always kind of at this level like a false tension between, on one side, innovation and progression, and then on the other side, power and fundamentals. And I think at the CT level, you have to have everything, right? Like, I think it's like you can kind of put people into boxes, and then you're like, oh, wow, I was surprised. That person's like a great rail surfer. I didn't expect it. Or that person's got an amazing air game. I didn't expect it. But you should expect it from everyone. And I think it's more often the wave venue and the conditions that dictate which parts of your surfing you need to lean into. In Western Australia, I think it was the speed and power really came to the foreground, and was a big winner out there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of related to what you see in basketball nowadays in the NBA. Obviously, the big thing when Steph Curry and everybody started dominating from the three-point line, that's where every team's direction was going, right? And you saw that with aerial surfing within, this sport. And I think if you go to the rim, if you're getting to the free throw line, that really relates to power surfing, people that are playing in the paint the entire time. And that's still going to be your base. And really, it should be your main base, because at the majority of the waves that we're going to have on the CT schedule, that's going to be the one reliable that you're always going to have. And I think Ethan Ewing's a perfect example of that. Barron has aerial surfing, but we haven't really seen it on the Championship Tour. But his best results have really come through his rail surfing so far. Same thing I could say from Kanoe Igarashi. I mean, the kids from Huntington Beach, California, I would have to say one of the most diverse waves in the entire world. That wave changes probably 10, 15 times per day. And if you look at his best results so far this season, it's been with his rail surfing. So, props to everybody that's done well in WA in the past with that. And I think there's a lot more to come, having that event on the Championship Tour schedule for many years. And, my second winner, I think it's pretty obvious, but we're all really stoked on the rookie class we saw on the men's side qualify for the Championship Tour in 2024. But it's a golden trio. It's Marco Mignot, Alan Cleland, and Joel Vaughn. All those guys not only survived the cut, they put on some really great performances throughout the first 7 events of the season. Especially Marco, he's the one that's leading right now, and I think he's really put himself on a pedestal, saying that, hey, I survived the cut. Yeah, I'm happy. I have a smile on my face, but my goal is to win Rookie of the Year and eventually win a world championship. And that kind of attitude gets you a long ways. He's not comfortable, and I think there's no room to be comfortable on the Championship Tour. Same thing for Al. He was comboed in his heat on the round of 16, and for some reason, I'm doing the heat. And I'm just thinking to myself, your combo, there's 1:20 left. He goes for this massive floater on the end section, nearly dies, breaks his board. And I'm just thinking to myself, dude, like, that's the kind of personality and the kind of attitude that we want to see at this level. Regardless of where you're at in the heat and the rankings, you still got to go for it, because you do have something to prove. I mean, once those top seeds come against you in the next round or in the next event, they know what to expect out of you. And same thing for Joel Vaughn. I mean, the kid had a string of 9s at the beginning of the season. Aerial surfer, of course, and I think he's going to be really fun to watch at lowers, but watch out for his barrel riding skills, too. I think he's going to be really one to defeat over there in Tahiti. But that golden trio, I think they're amazing, and really stoked to have him in the back end of the season.
Oh, it's a great call. And I mean, I think too, like outside of their respective communities and maybe home countries, like all three of them were relatively unknown, you know, by the kind of the global populace, like heading into the tour. And I think that's such a cool thing about the CT is like, it really, it is inoculated from like media hype or marketing hype. And if you're good enough, you can go out there and just perform, and you can actually level up your fan base. You can level up your profile just by going out there and performing. And I think, like another shout out, I think, you know, Huey Vaughn, Joel's younger brother, went bananas at the Stab High event in Japan. I think he won the junior division. So yeah, good things happening in that family for sure. But that's a great winner. The second winner from the West for me are the Colapinto brothers, you know, Griffin and Crosby. They finished second and third respectively at Margaret River. But really, it's because they moved up to 11th and 16th on the rankings heading into Lower Trestles. And you can look at the balance of the season, the first 7 events, like it's kind of an off year for these two. When you consider Griffin has been a world title contender for a few years, he's had 4 17th places in 2025 so far, Pipe, Paniche, El Salvador, and Burley Heads, and was kind of almost unfathomably, almost unthinkably hovering around the cut. It's Friday. Almost unthinkably hovering around the cut line, you know, before getting that third at Bells. And WA really felt like a proper return to form from him. Somewhat, you know, we saw impressive showings at the box and at main break. And then Crosby, on the other hand, he started the year with an injury and was really surfing for his survival out west. His third place finish saw him shoot up to 16th on the rankings from 27th. So that really saved his season. And both brothers are now heading to their proper home at Lower Trestles for the Lexus Trestles Pro presented by Outerknown, which will happen in a couple weeks. So I think the Colapinto brothers came up big out west.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good call out, but jumping 11 spots is huge for Crosby. He got super emotional with Kaipo after his heat at the box, realizing that he had made the cut already by making the quarterfinals. You know, I think that just is an attest to how much dedication and time and just perseverance a lot of these men and women put into this, and it's their livelihood, it's their careers, and it's hard to feel bad for people who make a living by traveling the world and competing at some of the world's best waves, but in the end, like, for some of these men and women, they don't know anything else, and they've been doing this since they were young teenagers, and now actually succeeding at this level. It's obviously something huge, but most importantly, for them to be able to do it in the spotlight in really small sample size worldwide, might I add. It's not like you're looking at Major League Baseball where there's hundreds of players every single year within the majors. Here we're talking about maybe 36 men within a single event. That's pre-cut, by the way, and now you got a reduced field, especially competing at home. That's going to feel great for both of them. First time ever, Crosby's going to compete at home at a CT event. Same thing for Cole Houshman, and watch out for Griffin. As you said, he's up to number 11 right now in the rankings, looking for his first victory of the season. It's going to be a fun one to watch, this next one. And my final winner, just shout out, you know, GWM Aussie Treble. Not only do I appreciate your guys' support, especially to the sport of surfing, 3 events that were totally different. I like that. I think it needs to be challenging for the surfers. More importantly, I thought the waves, the vibes, and of course, having the cut right here in WA made this event much more exciting. Also doesn't hurt that the winners of the Aussie Treble got a brand new truck. Congrats to Jordy and Isabella Nichols. Jordy didn't even know that he won it until, Kaipo told him in the water over there. But Isabella, she had an amazing Aussie Treble. But GWM, the support. And of course, I think all different venues making them so exciting by being completely different waves. Bells, we had 2 sides, Winky Pop and the Bowl. We went over to Burley Heads, was acting more like a beach rake, really rippable and fun. And of course, right here in WA, with the addition of the box, I thought it was super exciting, Dave.
Yeah, it's a great one. And I thought Jordy on stage after the event was particularly funny because he's like, I didn't even know I won. And A+ to the camera crew because they immediately panned to Griffin Colapinto leaning up against the car that Jordy had won and was like super bummed about it. So I thought that was pretty good. Similarly, like my final winner coming out of the Western Australia Margaret River Pro is, I just think it's the team. You know, they got the treble done. Yeah, everyone on the event event side, the marketing side, water safety, security, staffing, judges, commissioners, broadcast, comms folks, everyone. These events are really hard work, and having 3 of them in a row, including one that relocated, primary venues just weeks before it kicked off with the Gold Coast event moving from Snapper Rocks to Burley Heads. It's a huge endeavor, and because of all their hard work, we got to see some insane surfing. So huge thanks to them. And it was an exciting run in Australia. Looking forward to the Lexus Trestle Pro presented by Outerknown. And we'll take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we are going to talk surfboards. All right, welcome back to the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Mitch Salazar. It's now time to discuss where we're at post-cut on the 2025 Vissla CT Shaper Rankings.
Shaper Rankings!
We're now into our 3rd year, so for listeners who have not heard about this before, the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings is a combined men's and women's ranking. We count all surfers finishing in the quarterfinals or better. The Shapers receive the same rankings points that correlate to their respective surfer finishes. The higher the surfer places, the more points the Shaper receives. And we're tracking the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings from Pipeline through Tahiti. In addition to being honored the 2025 CT Shaper of the Year at the WSL Awards, this year's winner will also be gifted an overnight stay and surf at Surf Ranch Lemoore, courtesy of the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch and the WSL. So when the dust had finished on the first 7 events, on the cut event, on the 3rd event of the treble out west, 2-time CT Shaper of the Year, Matt Biolos and Lost Surfboards, out to a commanding lead. They're in first. They have 174,625 points, followed up by Sharp Eye, 119,935 points. DHD, great run through the first portion of the season, 103,475 points. Channel Islands, they have slipped since that first event of the season, 98,355 points. And JS, I think that program, Mitch, that you and I had been monitoring for a couple of years, big run in 2025. They are 5th at the moment, 64,900 points. Last week, Mitch, we had Kanoa Igarashi on the podcast. He had just been eliminated the day before at the box, a real 2s or 10s approach. I think he probably got the biggest bomb of the day and almost came out, and that's just the way it goes. Kanoa gave us some great detail on his relationship with surfboards. He famously was with Channel Islands for a huge portion of his career. The last 7 years he's been with Sharp Eye, and this season he's switched to JS. It was interesting getting his take just on the amount of boards and the differences in equipment choice with these 2 venues of Main Break at Margaret River and the box. With someone of your experience, Mitch, like how would you kind of break down the differences in boards if you're looking at 6 to 8 foot Main Break versus 6 to 8 foot box? What are the key differences in equipment?
I am still shocked, honestly, that people ride such short boards over there at Main Break when it's big. It's a wave that really demands you to paddle and be in position. Personally, in those kind of situations, I always prefer riding something a little bit bigger, especially I'm a big dude. I can move that thing around easily. But for the box, that's a tough wave, and I think it might have been either Luke Egan or Tom Whitaker that mentioned that you don't want to ride something too long just because you're actually going to pearl. So something that just fits under the lip line to be able to get in, and then once you're on the wave, the rest of the wave does the talking, and it's just pushing you forward the entire time. That's how much energy that wave has, whereas Main Break, you need to be kind of searching for that wave a lot more. So personally, I'd just be riding something with a bit more volume over there at Main Break. Still a good amount of rocker, especially for that last section. You don't want to dig your nose at the end, right where the reef's popping up. But, the box is such a complicated wave. I really put it more in the boards that you're going to ride probably at Small Pipeline and Backdoor, maybe Puerto Escondido, something like that, or even, behind the rock at Snapper. That's usually what you're seeing with those kind of takeoffs, especially for goofy footers. But yeah, Main Break, if you're John, if you're Baron, you're probably still riding a 6'2" at the most, even if it's 15 feet out there, which is still crazy. But I'd like to see people ride a little bit of a longer board. I just think it's so demanding with that. But in the end, high-performance shortboard, something with a good amount of rocker, a little bit more of a broad end tail, and kind of a flat V throughout the entire board, I would feel, just because you want to keep that speed. It's not necessarily a wave where you need to regain it the entire time. If you have a good read from it from the get-go, I feel like you're going to be able to complete a couple of different turns, especially with that end section come towards you.
It's a great insight. Let's talk about the current men's frontrunner, Jordy Smith from Durban, South Africa. current front runner, surfing incredibly. Posted a big win in Margaret Rivers. Guest surfing for Jason Stevenson, the crew over there at JS Industries, Sam Zubovich. He was riding those boards, kind of across a couple of the venues there in Australia. But I think Jordy has accomplished something we have never seen in Vissla CT Shaper Rankings history. He is the first surfer to post results for not one, not two, but 3 different board labels. Posted a win on his family label of Smith Shapes in El Salvador. Posted a 5th place finish on Lost Surfboards at Bells Beach, and now a win on JS Surfboards. I should say he got a 5th on JS Surfboards as well on the Gold Coast, but a win in Margaret River. I know we've talked about it before, but it's just such an interesting phenomenon for me because so often we see really well-performing CT surfers have kind of a intimate and singular relationship with their shaper. Whereas Jordy, and this might be a virtue of the fact that he's been doing this for as long as he has, seems to have great relationships with a number of shapers to the point that he's producing huge results for them. What are your thoughts on that, Mitch?
No, it's an excellent point. I mean, how many times have we talked about him being in Modern Collective, all these other Kai Neville films, Taylor Steele, back in the day too. When he first started surfing, at that level and getting that exposure worldwide, he was actually riding JS's. I believe he won World Surfing Games here in 2006 in Huntington when he was 18 years old, won on a JS, eventually was still winning those QSs back in the day. And that's when that bidding war started to happen with not only the major sponsorship brands, also for boards. And when he started to ride his dad's boards a lot more in the mid-2010s, I was like, dude, you know what? They're translating to results. They're working well. And that relationship is obviously as personal as you could possibly get right there. So there's always going to have that clear communication. And not only that, you're going to get a board instantly with your father. And that guy can make a board anywhere in the world. If he's on the road and he needs to stop by a shaping bay, he'll just call up a buddy. But I'm a big fan of this. And I just think it presents no ego. If you look at it, he's gone to Matt. He's been like, hey, Matt, I need a board like this for myself for this type of wave. It's worked at 2 venues already. He won in El Salvador with the Smith Shapes, but leading up to the final, he had been riding his Mayhem for the majority of the time. Now with Jason Stevenson, with his father, I mean, he's looked superb. The role he's been on, the last 4 events, 2 victories and 2 quarterfinals. I mean, really absurd when you think about it. And not just that, the numbers that he's been posting for the majority of those events too. So looks consistent, looks like he's having a lot of fun, but most importantly, he's really just depending, on the people around him too. And I think when you have that open-mindedness and lack of ego, things are going to go your way most often than not.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many side conversations about the role that Jordy's been on this year, and a lot of them are kind of marinated in the point of like, well, he's 37, like, is he actually past his prime, and why didn't he accomplish this earlier in his career, kind of things, and can he do it? And to that, I'd kind of respond that, like, I think longevity in athletes across sports is increasing for sure. I think with someone like Jordy in particular, he seems like he's been super dialed in on his own, personal wealth, his health, maybe his
health
wealth.
Is wealth.
Hey, I guess probably both. But just his own physicality and like flexibility, and he has just seemed like he doesn't share a ton of it, but you can tell like he's in better shape than he's ever been. So while he might be 37, like he might be at like 27 physically, which is peak. He's had a few years where he's been injured, which I think's helped him fly under the radar.
Yes.
But I think he just has all the tools. The guy can ride the tube, the guy can lay the rail, the guy can punt, and he's got so much experience that I really think a title run for him this year and over the next several years, if he decides to keep competing, is well within the cards.
And he's deserving of it too. And
Absolutely.
And that's, like when you get into your head and you're thinking, why aren't these results coming the entire time? You may start to not only overthink things, but you start to overcalculate all the decisions that you're making too. And, I haven't seen that with him this year. Outside of really the early loss at Pipe to Joel Vaughn, actually, where he lets him go on a wave right at the end and Joel gets the score. Like, outside of that, I haven't really seen anything happen, for him negatively in terms of decision-making within heats. But, he's not only been a major catalyst of progress within surfing for all those people that have been doubting, him winning the world championship. he's gone through multiple generations of surfers too. And Dane Reynolds, Julian Wilson, those guys aren't on tour anymore. I know Julian's trying to make a comeback right now, but outside of his generation of surfers, he's really the only one relevant yet in terms of competing. Then you go through Gabe, you go through Felipe, Italo. You still had Kelly on the brinks, and of course, Mick and Joel back in their day. He had to go through multiple different surfers, and now still facing off against Kanoa, Ethan, Jack. And for him to succeed at this point is obviously something truly inspirational. But most importantly, as you said, it just adds to the fact that he's been healthy the entire year. And we haven't seen that so far from Jordy, I would say, in the last decade. Foot injuries, lower back injuries. We've seen that with Felipe a lot, too. I mean, surfers just aren't, human bodies aren't designed for you to sustain a landing 100 times per month after landing a big air. Your back's obviously going to give out eventually. And, those kind of injuries, if you're healthy the entire time, I think results will come eventually.
It's a great point. The phone was also blown up, I think, during the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings breakdown post-finals in WA. Our colleague Ronnie Blakey made a pretty good comment about Bronte McCauley in her run to third place there. Ended up on a Sharp Eye board that she paid retail for. So I think he publicly questioned whether Marcio and the team got points for that. They absolutely do, but I think Marcio, Yufu, the crew at Sharp Eye, maybe consider dialing Bronte in for a few boards. Yeah. She looked awesome on that, and she still looks like she's got plenty in the tank in terms of being able to mix it up with the world's best surfers.
Yeah, but, she went and said this is going to be her last event. And, props to her. She's had a great career out of the last 6 years now, I want to say. She's made the semifinals 5 times, which is just incredible considering that she's competing at home under pressure. I mean, the crowd was in her favor. It was really cool to see her not only compete in front of her friends and family, but also in front of her father. And, to be able to do that in front of a person that's been able to win the event before at home, really cool. But just staying on the note with Sharp Eye, I mean, they're still lacking firepower. Felipe has the victory over there at Burley Heads. He still needs to get going, though. He's at number 7 at the moment, but hasn't really had 2 results outside of quarterfinals so far this year. Jack Robinson, that's 2 bad events in a row after the victory at Bells Beach. Dude, shout out to Leo Fioravanti. I mean, man, that guy was posting excellent numbers all event long. And
he looked great.
And what are you going to do in that event? I mean, you had to let Griffin go. The wave was a closeout, and luckily for Griff, I mean, he just punted his way to a perfect score. But Leo's been ripping all season long. He's still a member of the top 10 currently at number 9. Jake Marshall still surfing great. He's at number 12 at the moment. Yep. Rio Waidas had a little bit of a up and down since the 2 good results over in Abu Dhabi and Portugal. And, of course, I think for Jason Stevenson, we've mentioned it before, first time ever JS has been in the top 5 since the inception of the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings. Jordy has a lot to do with that, with the win right here. The addition of Kanoa is major too, but they are still lacking presence on the women's team. So that's where they need to get more surfers, and hopefully we see a lot more female surfers on the Challenger Series in Newcastle over on JS Boards.
Yeah. We obviously, we know Sierra Kerr, former world junior champ. She's a huge talent. She rides for JS. We'll see how she does on the Challengers this year. But yeah, I think we should also give props up to Matt Biolis and the Lost program. Everybody there, Gian Bernini, like they have been so incredibly well balanced these last few years that we've been monitoring this. And I was talking to someone about this during the event, and they said, before you guys started measuring this, I think all of us would have assumed that Lost Surfboards was like one of the main players, at that elite level of CT performance. But they're like, I don't think anybody would have picked them as the main player. They would have been in the mix. And, whether that would have changed, in seasons before we measured or not, I think everyone's just been astounded at how successful that team is, how well constructed it is, how balanced it is. And that's just been the case for the past 2.5 seasons so far. Even looking at like the women's 7 events this year, they've won 4 out of the 7, right? We mentioned 2 for Gabby Bryan, but another one for Caroline Marks, another one for new team rider, Betty Lou Sakura Johnson. And then on the men's side, we have Iago Dora, won at Super Tubos. We had Griffin Colapinto, post a runner-up in Margaret River. They're just incredibly deep. And heading into their hometown event of Lower Trestles, given their success, they'd have to be flying high. They'd have to be looking for a big win at home.
Yeah, I saw a clip of Haushi recently at lowers when it's been pumping over the last few weeks. He got back from WA straight into swell over there, and I saw a left of his that he just demolished. And if we remember Goofy Footers over at lowers, remember local boy Tanner Gudauskas, 2016 makes his way into finals day. We could easily see that, but once again, the major highlight, for all our listeners and everybody around the world, is to not only highlight the label, but the people that work under the label too. All the glassers, all the sanders, as you mentioned, the team managers. How many people does this own label employ? And it's just not Mayhem. JS, Sharp Eye, everybody worldwide. And look at how it's not only affected the industry financially in a major positive way. Look at the amount of competitiveness that we're seeing from each and every one of these major labels too. I would say 2025 in terms of release of new models has been substantially higher than in the past decade. I mean, Channel Islands, they've brought out a few new models. Mayhem's brought out a few new models in the last 12 or 16 months. Jason Stevenson and his team has also released a few new models. So overall, I think the Vissla CT Shaper Rankings is adding a lot of value to this, and just really stoked to see their undoubted support, and I think most importantly, really pushing for progress within the sport of surfing.
We mentioned like the heightened emotion in WA. It's been that way, the last few years as the cut event. I think this year in particular on both sides, for surfers that made it and surfers that didn't, it was probably extra heightened just because of the fact of the changes that are being implemented to the championship tour in 2026, where you're not only competing to qualify for the back portion of the 2025 CT, but you're virtually guaranteed a whole year in 2026, either 12 events or 10 events, depending on if you make the cut, but you will be returning for that final event at the Pipe Masters. So I think some of these programs, board builder programs, were really benefited from this event in terms of who they maintain. And some of them, as we mentioned before, took some big hits, right? Yeah. We saw six go from Channel Islands. Sharp Eye, they lost 3. In Ian Gouveia, Joanne Defay, and Tatiana Weston Webb. DHD lost 2 in Liam O'Brien and Nadia Aristarbe. They lost 2, Ian Gentile, Sawyer Lindbad. And then there were a number of programs that lost their single surfer on the CT, Minami with Jackson Bunch, Slater Designs with David Silva, TNC Surfboards with Sally Fitzgibbons, Silver Surf with Edgard Grosja, and Johnny Cabianca with the injured Gabriel Medina. I'm sure we will see all of them back in different capacities, but for you, Mitch, does that change the calculus sort of heading into the back portion of the year in terms of who can still challenge lost surfboards in their sort of commanding lead?
It's actually an excellent point, and one that I hadn't thought of myself personally. I think especially with the head-to-head format from the get-go of events in 2026, especially starting at Bells, it's actually something that's significant. And looking at a lot of the Mayhem team riders, they're still pretty well distributed among the top 22 on the men, and on the women's side, they still have a good amount within the top 10. And I think Gabby Bryan's success this year for Mayhem has been so incredibly valuable because you haven't really seen the Caroline Marks of the last 2 or 3 years and her consistency. Right. You saw Sori Lindblad have moments of brilliance, not her best year. She didn't make the cut for the back end of 2025, but she will be in the tour for 2026. But if you look at what Carissa was adding value to the brand for Mayhem, we're seeing that with Gabby right now. And
it's crazy that it's been that kind of a substitution when you think of it. Like, it's really interesting.
And it's just not the 2 victories. It's other results, too. I mean, outside of Pipeline, she's really only lost 5 heats all year long, and it's really incredible when you look at her statistics. She is leading the average heat score department on the women's side so far, more than 12 points every single time she paddles out, which is just good, obviously, if you're a fan of hers, and herself if she's leading the rankings too. But on the men's side, you look at Haushi, you look at Crosby, you look at Griffin and Yago. That is a spectacular team, and still not counting a few other guys that are in the mix right there too. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more guys from their team also qualify for the CT for next season. But most importantly, I think for a lot of brands, it's really just about having the head count on tour, especially with the format being the way it is next year. You get off to a good result in the first 2 or 3 events. I mean, the sky's the limit for what you're able to do in the back end of the season of 2026. So getting a head count, obviously, and I feel like that's where we're going to see more team managers have way more attention to detail in the Challenger Series events rather than just the CT events alone.
It's a great point. And, shout out to all the shapers that supported the CT surfers at whatever level the program is.
Yep.
Like, they are truly creating like the best equipment on the planet. And, whether their stock on the rankings is rising or falling, like every single one of them is delivering like F1 Ferrari level equipment for the world's best surfers. And I think in a lot of ways, like, you could see some balancing out of teams over time. And it's not like one team in particular from an equipment standpoint has the hot hand. All of them are delivering like elite level boards right now. So it's just interesting to see where they land. Mitch, you mentioned, we're finally getting some south swell. Feels like it's been an endless and at times challenging kind of fall and winter of very, very cold water, not the greatest of waves, some natural disasters in the mix. But what have you been riding yourself? Where have you been surfing? What have you been up to?
Yeah, actually, I would say the last 10 days or so, I've really only stuck to Huntington for the most part. I've surfed a couple of days in Newport and at River Jetty's fun, but yeah, to be honest, I rode my Cali Twin, that's a Mayhem Times MR collaboration, a good amount of days, just because on the early morning high tide, or now really the drained out tide, you kind of want to have that extra paddle power. The shortboard's still the Uber XL. I'm kind of keeping the big rig on ice for when the waves get really good. But fish and regular shortboard kind of been my two preferences so far. Down here in SoCal, I mean, weather's been super nice. It's been about 75 degrees most days when it's sunny outside. And the water, I would have to say, is 65, 66 on a good day. So if possible, I've been wearing a top and trunks, but mainly kind of keeping it cool with a short sleeve. But I mean, it's been fun, and hopefully we get the same kind of weather and waves for the event at Lowers. But what about yourself, Dave? What have you been riding lately?
Oh, I've been pretty busy lately, but I haven't surfing as much as I'd like. But yeah, it's funny. Like, we've got some sneaky little winter spots that are like my favorite spots that for some reason May is sort of like an outlier month where we get like a funny angled swell or a funny intervaled swell that gets in there, which is always nice because it's not as freezing, but you still can find some good wedges. So yeah, in the back, since I got back from Oz a couple weeks ago, I've been riding my Dumpster Diver 2 in Spine Tech with these, actually Ruby hooked me up a while back, these fiberglass. It's the John sort of, it's in the middle of like a medium. I've had it for a while. Like, it's in the middle of like a medium and a large template. I've always ridden large template fins because I usually ride like shorter, stumpier boards, but this is kind of in the middle and it felt really good. And and it's, to your point, like the weather's been pretty nice. We were up here, in Ventura County, we've got the Channel Islands, and that channel, we get like a lot of onshore wind typically at this time of year, and it's been a lot lighter than it has been in the past, and so it's kept some pretty sneaky good little sandbars out here, which has been really fun. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting down to Lower Trestles in a week and a half and seeing what it's like down there. But yeah, that'll wrap up our Vissla CT Shaper Ranking segment. We're going to get one more break in for our sponsors. And when we come back, we will talk about fantasy and get into listener questions. So we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Lineup Podcast, everybody. I'm your part-time co-host, Mitch Salazar, and that is the great Dave Prodan. We're going to talk fantasy. This year, the Lineup Pod is running a CT fantasy contest. We're going to be playing all season long and awarding the overall top 3 fantasy winners at the end of the season with gift cards to the WSL store valuing $50 to $150. Update on our fantasy rankings, Dave, within our Lineup Fantasy Mega League. Our top 5. Ooh, look at this. Some changes. Leo Barcelo Surf, 860-61 points. Becky Then Some, 841-17. In third, Limas, 829. The Sniper in fourth. The Sniper S is with a capital S, 828-60. And Harry underscore Harb, 822-27. He is in fifth. Our overall rankings worldwide, though, once again, Mateus Guilherme MG. He's on the top of the rankings, 42, 25, 88 points. Joey Pepperoni drops down to second. He's at 42, 18, 56. And Nicholas Capelle, he is down to number 3, 41, 58, 78. Congrats, ladies and gentlemen. That is a pretty top of the lineup right there. Any last-minute sneakers, Dave, in your team? I'm interested to see who you had over there in WA.
It's a good question. How did I do? Not great. Where's my team? Let's see. In our lineup podcast Mega League, I finished 449th. My team
higher than me,
I guess. Yeah. It's like so feel very good about. I did select Gabriela Bryan on my tier A power surfer rankings. So that was positive. Pick Isabella Nichols. I thought that was pretty smart, and she performed pretty well. Yep. And then I picked Vahine Fierro and Brisa Hennessy. That didn't go super great for me. On the men's side, Ethan Ewing and Jack Robinson I felt were inspired choices that failed to deliver. Leonardo Fioravanti I felt like it was a pretty good pick. Zhao Xianca, not a whole lot there. Al Cleland, I felt good about the way he surfed. Didn't really deliver.
He ripped, yeah.
George Pitar, I was banking on the necessity of a result to make the cut, and also just his past performance there. Didn't pan out for him. And then in Tier C, Jacob Wilcox, I felt did really well as a wild card. And then I went with my guy Ryan Callanan on a Hail Mary to qualify.
Rhino.
Really. And that's the thing with Ryan Callanan. Even when he loses, he looks amazing, and his performances look really, really good. He just couldn't get the result. So, yeah, it wasn't... I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with my picks overall. I was kind of, as Jordy was mowing through the event, in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm glad I picked Jordy. Like, that was an obvious one. And then I looked at it, I'm like, no, I didn't pick him. So, feels like a miss. But I don't know, Mitch, what about you? How'd your team do? And what were you thinking behind your selections?
I can't believe I'm a part-time co-host with you, and we talk about fantasy surfing on this podcast. But it has been so bad for me so far within the last 3 events. I think within the last 3 events, I haven't set my men's team twice, and I didn't do that for this event once again. Shout out, Mitch. You're in the top 20,000, I think, overall, and you're around number 550 right now in the Lineup Fantasy League. On our women's side, I did set my team, though. I went out of the box just thinking to myself, I have room to make up, and I had Molly Picklum as my power surfer. Made the quarters, still not the best result, though. And my mid-tiers, I thought were going to do way better. Caroline Marks, disappointing 9th, and Sawyer Limbalad. She had made the final last year. She loses out in the corners and ends up at number 11 in the rankings. But I also had Brisa Hennessy, just thinking that she needed a result, and was looking good up until the moment that she lost. And yeah, I just don't think she's really looked as consistent as she had in the past throughout the entire calendar season. She's going to be on for 2026, though. Do want to say a major shout out to our WSL producer and good friend, Matt Schulman, who is a terrific listener of the Lineup podcast. He's at number 9th right now in our Lineup League, Dave. Shout out, Matty. You are doing good stuff, my guy.
Matty rips too. Surfs really well.
He does, and he's an awesome dude. And new father, by the way. Congrats to him and his wife. Sleeper picks, though, just for reference for next seasons. Did mention that Crosby Colapinto has a style that suits this wave. He made it to the semis. Anybody that picked Crosby, you did well. And on the women's side, just have to say, Lakey Peterson, if you were betting on Lakey, I mean, you did very well. She made it to the semis, too, and 6,085 points, but obviously, we count the points that you got from their heat totals. Overall, though, I thought it was a really important event for a lot of people. Some did perform very well, including Peterson. But overall, Dave, what you think about the fantasy teams and their picks this year? I feel like Gabby was no doubt the most selected surfer on the women's side.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even looking at Leo Barcelo's surf, like a huge scoreline. But like sometimes I'm always surprised where I'm like, I guess they just picked the 4 semifinalists on the women's side, and they they must have just ran the table on terms of like the surfers who performed. But Leo had Tyler Wright, great pick, but Tyler went out in the round of 16. Also had Jack Robinson, smart pick, but went out in the round of 32. George Pitar, same as me, so clearly a higher species of intelligence, this Leo Barcelo individual, but went out right in the round of 32. And Samuel Pupo. So I guess it goes to show like you can be really smart with your picks, and you don't have to run the table. You can win the event pretty easy. So I guess that's inspiring in terms of hope, but also maybe a little bit disappointing where I'm like, I've never gotten close, so that's how bad I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, luckily for the people that are doing well in our league, Once again, you can still join our fantasy league, the Lineup Podcast Mega League. You can enter, and of course, everything that's in store is available. Gift cards, $50 to $150 are the prizes. Got jerseys, we got exclusive Yeti and WSL gear, and a lot more cool stuff in there. But make sure to set your teams and your power surfers ahead of the event, because you don't want to be like me and lose out early and not have any points later on. Just referencing lowers real quick. Give me 3 people, 2 men, 1 female that we should look out for.
Oh, shoot, man. You're putting me on the spot here. Okay, so very long range, right, with our partners at Surfline. But we have talked about how, the Southern Hemisphere has been activated. We are getting south swells. It does look like there are a couple south swells lined up for lower trestles during the window, certainly early in the window. And and I think that tension point we talked about earlier about, innovation and progression on one side versus, power and fundamentals on the other side. I think lowers is maybe the most appropriate venue to see that tension play out, right? We can see people drop huge scores with single maneuvers there with big airs or big combinations, but we can also see surfers requiring full rides and well put together runs, totally on rail to get excellent scores. I think that it's hard to be keep an eye on that Jordy Smith. He's number one, kind of thing. But so definitely keep an eye on him. I think we mentioned him earlier, Ethan Ewing. I feel like we're due for a big breakout performance from Ethan Ewing across these next few events. You brought it up perfectly. The last time we've seen him surf lower trestles was as a WSL finalist, and he was electric. He was so good out there. So I think he's outside the top 5. There's not a ton of spotlight on him. He's still surfing better than ever. I just think we're going to see something really exciting there. I think another one to keep an eye on, right, is Felipe Toledo, who objectively, and I'll let better surfers comment on this than myself, but one could argue might be the very best lower trestle surfer in the history of human beings. He's had a little bit of a light year outside of the big win at Burley Heads. This could be another opportunity for him to really flex. So I'd keep an eye on him. And then just the San Clemente boys. We mentioned Griffin and Crosby. How are they going to do at home at lower trestles? And then on the women's side, I kind of think the post-cut relief will be interesting for someone like Erin Brooks, right? She's made the postseason. Yeah. She's made the full season for 2026. She can relax. She can do the surfing that got her to this point. She's got a lot of experience out there. So I'm really interested in that. And then, another one. Geez, it's tough. Oh, we mentioned her already. Lakey Peterson. Huge lives momentum. There. He lives there. Huge momentum coming off of WA. And I think for someone like her, it's can she capitalize and make a little bit of a run? And probably no better venue than Good South Swell at lower trestles. But Mitch, what about you? Who are you keeping your eye on for the upcoming event?
All right. My 2 guys are just, kind of under the radar. This one's obviously not so under the radar, but I'm going to put Yagadora. I just saw his social media. As soon as he lost out in WA, he made the trek over here to LAX, and he's been in Southern California for over a week right now. And looking at his success, at these types of waves before, it's going to be the first time we're ever going to see him compete at this venue. I'm really, really excited. But just the free surfs alone, he looks incredible. His shapers here, he's been getting a ton of new boards, and I think he's going to be one to look out for. I actually have him as my pick to win the entire event. Another sneaky one, I'm just going to have to go with Haushi. And I think that Cole is both underrated on the right and the left. I think most people are going to be thinking that he's going to go right, but I feel like if the left's going off, when I surf out there and I see him, he's typically on the left, and it's an underrated wave. It's much shorter but punchier, and I think he has a chance to make it deep into the event. On the women's side, I was going to say Erin Brooks, but just to say somebody else, and it's really going to come to no surprise, it's Caitlin Simmers. I mean, she won the World Championship there last year, but just the creativity in her lines and how complex she makes things look, I think she's going to be one really hard to beat out there, and it's going to be fun to watch her too.
I've got one bonus one for everyone to watch,
go.
That is 11-time world champion Kelly Slater.
He
is a wild card at lower Trestles. I think the public discourse around someone like Kelly is that he can pretty much compete wherever he wants, but I think that when it comes to venues like Pipeline, Teohopu, Cloudbreak are places where people at this point in his career at 53 years young are giving him a better edge compared to the world's best surfers, and that, you know, what you'd consider more kind of like combination based high performance venues like a lower Trestles or a Jeffreys Bay or whatever, maybe not as dominant as he once was. But it's a little bit like that Michael Jordan Last Dance scene where he's making up controversies in his head just to motivate him. I think that Kelly, new father, congratulations once again. New father again, I should say. I think he's aware of the discourse, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's been in the Fortress of Solitude training like a monster and is using that to fuel his performance at lower Trestles. So I'm interested. I want to know, what kind of board is he going to ride? Like, is it going to be something experimental? Like, how's he look fitness wise? Like, has he been in the gym or whatever his version of the gym is? And what's he going to bring to the canvas, especially if they're swell? I don't know. That's just another one to keep on your menu, everyone. I'm interested to see what's going to go down.
100%. And Kelly, I mean, we're talking about you, so go out there and do your thing at Lowers, a place that you've won at multiple times. By the way, just before we get into our listener questions, Kelly Slater is the first and only surfer, once he makes his debut this year at Lowers, to surf at a single venue in 5 different decades. In the 80s, in the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, and the 2020s. Just remarkable what we're seeing from the 11-time world champion. So our listener questions segment. Wow. Big thank you to everybody who always writes into at the lineup pod. If we don't get to your question in today's episode, we're going to do our best to respond in our DMs as we always do. Shout out to A. Condon, Willie Goat 0230, Logan Marlowe Harris, Day Theo. They brought in great questions, but we're going with our boy at Dominic.Lux. Does Jordy stand a chance to win the final 5 in Fiji? And just to add on to it, at Todd_Davo, kind of the same question. How do you rate Jordy's chances of winning his first world title in 2025?
Ooh, that's probably the question on everyone's minds at the moment.
Really is.
And I know we talked about Jordy a bit already. I think from every component that goes into an athlete career, like physical fitness, like the psychological sharpness, equipment, experience, ability, I think Jordy's never been stronger across every component at 37. Like, I don't think he has really any flaw across those components. I think his backhand in reef breaks is something that I think people at both times tend to overlook and also underestimate. Yeah. So for me, like, if Jordy is in the number 1 spot heading into the finals, the WSL finals at Fiji, it almost becomes a different exercise than if he's number 3, right? And I wonder about that, and I don't want to make comparisons, but you know, the concern would be, is it sort of a Carissa Moore situation where in his head, don't knock to Carissa Moore at all, she's incredible, but like in his head, he's the number 1 surfer, you know, any other season he's won the world title, but he's watching whoever, like an Iago or a Jack or an Italo or a Griffin steamrolling through that format at a Cloudbreak or a Restaurants and challenging him for that world title. Or is he someone who's experientially that put together that he's going to be fine, you know? And I think conditions have a lot to do with it, right? Where it's like his backhand's excellent, and it's not really like you're going to be seeing at either Restaurants or Cloudbreak a really ledgy, slabby backhand barrel that may advantage some other surfers more than him. It's combination surfing kind of at both venues. So I think he's got a good chance. I don't know, Mitch, what do you think about that?
No, I mean, the only way I would see him not doing, you know, great at least would be if it's like 20 feet. And at that point, I'd probably be thinking, okay, Jack Robinson, like, if you make it there, this is your time to shine. But, you know, the guy just has incredible mental fortitude. And we talk about him being in year number 18. at this point, yeah, people are like, oh, he still hasn't won the world title, but does he really have anything to prove and anything to lose?
Right.
I don't think so. I mean, close to 20 years on the CT, you've accomplished everything you wanted to outside of the world championship. Like, dude, there's always going to be doubters whether you win or you lose, you know? So at this point, who even cares about the opinion of others rather than just of yourself? And you can just tell how much it matters to him emotionally, especially after the win over there in Central America. Like, he got quite excited just thanking his wife, you know, who's been holding down the fort at home, and his dad, who's done everything for him in his career. So, yeah, I don't necessarily see him defeating himself in that sense. If anything, I see it as extra motivation for him and, you know, something really to gain out of it. But, yeah, I agree in the sense that the strategy changes a lot more if you're number 1 and number 3, because it's like do or die if you're number 2, number 3, or back end. Right. Whereas if you're number 1, you maybe have a little bit more space to play with. And I feel like with how we're seeing him right now, dude, he's got nearly a 5,000-point lead over Italo at the moment in second. Like, there's a good chance that he's the number 1 seed, especially with the fact that he's won at lowers twice before. He's won in Brazil already, and he's won twice in South Africa. So outside of Felipe, there's really nobody better at J-Bay.
Totally. The one thing I will call out, because I think this is a really juicy question, is that he has never competed in the WSL finals, right? And we've seen excellent level surfers first time in that format, regardless of where they start. Yeah. It's a different vibe. Now, it's going to be an extra different vibe because we're not at Lower Trestles this year, we're at Fiji. So maybe kind of the big spotlight piece isn't as bright out there because you don't have, it's a little bit more remote, but it's a unique format, you know, and I think we've seen surfers over the years, the second year, if they have the good fortune of getting into it, do much better than the first year.
100%.
So we'll see. Great questions, though.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it, guys. And, you know, as always, send them in. If we don't get to them right now, we're always going to do our best to do it in our DMs. And our second question, another great one, and I think it's something that we haven't truly explained a lot in the broadcast just because it almost seems like it's self-explainable, but let's do it right here. At Matt Seabass, why do multiple surfers have the same coach when they compete against each other?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think there's like a lot of variables that go into it. You know, Mitch, as a competitor, your insight's going to be more important than mine here. But I think if you flash back, 20 years ago, and the major surf industry brands were really well capitalized, you saw most of the teams, quote unquote, like map to the major brands, like a Billabong or an O'Neill or Quicksilver or whatever. And often they would employ trainers and coaches within that team from that brand. I mean, Hurley, Nike were like infamous for this. They had like a huge squad and a ton of support and really set the standard on tour for a number of years. When the industry collapsed a bit in the late 2000s and weren't as well capitalized, you saw the surfers starting to align with a different kind of species of coach, right? You saw kind of a lot of ex-CT surfers move into the coaching space. And at that point, it kind of became, a function of economics, right? Where it's very expensive to travel on tour just by yourself. It's super expensive to bring someone along. So if you've got a good relationship with a Tom Whitaker or a Richard Dog Marsh or a Reynos Hayes or a Glenn Micro Hall or a Jake Patterson, and I'm sure Luke Egan, I'm sure I'm losing a bunch of them, but it makes more sense if you've got, instead of a 1-to-1, you've got 3 or 5 or 6 or 7, whatever the coach can handle and whatever you feel like you're being serviced by. That's kind of the situation you end up in. And those, comparatively, you might have surfers riding for a number of different brands or a number of different shapers, and they're all working with the same coach. And then the way that the draw is seated, often if the surfers do well enough, then they will end up matching up against each other. Before too long. But I don't know, Mitch, what do you think of that question and kind of maybe how it's changed over time?
No, well, it's a good explanation of, the state of the industry, of course. And, I remember when I worked at the Hurley employee store, Pat O'Connell was in charge of the brand. You had Brandon Gilmet, who had a very successful QS career too. Huntington
Great
Beach
surfer
boy.
too. Yeah.
Amazing. Same with Sean Ward. I mean, Sean was John's manager for a good number of years, and still manages Luana Silva, Eli Hanneman, among others. That was a guy who, just barely missed out on qualification for the CT a number of times. And yeah, these brands had these different people in multiple roles, but there would be times where they get sent on the role, not just to manage the team, really to be a fundamental part of their success within the event. And, we're not at that point anymore, unfortunately. Hopefully, that's really what we're seeing with a lot newer brands come on board. And, I think there's a possibility of that eventually becoming one thing, but you just got to look around you and really see the pieces align themselves. As you said, this person's already working with him. Let me inquire about how much he charges, how much I would have to pay him to work for several events. And it doesn't always have to be the same one. You could work with a completely different one depending on the region that they're at, just so that way you don't want to travel or pay for somebody's travel expenses worldwide. I know Caroline's been doing that before with Luke Egan and with Mike Carson. So it works out in your favor in that way. But there's times where you just have a better relationship and a better understanding with one person rather than the other. But I think that's why I look at guys like J. Bottle Thompson and everybody that travels worldwide. They work their butts off, Brian.
Oh, man.
I mean, you talk about them really sacrificing time with their family. It's obviously their job, but in the end, that's a lot of time away from home.
It's a great question, too, because similar to other individual sports like a tennis or something like that, we've seen surfers break with coaches because they're like, well, it's him or me or her or me. And and that just happens in sports. And again, these are surfers competing at the very highest level of their sport. They want to feel like they have 100% support. And if they don't feel like they're getting it, there's other opportunities out there. So spicy question. And I do think it is an individual sport, but having a support network on tour is essential. And we've seen it through, exposure on social media, et cetera, of just the family unit that those little coaching groups create, similar in a way that the brands created, 20 years ago. And I would say, too, the other component we've noticed is the shapers themselves and the board builders themselves. Yeah. It might not align 100% to the coaches, but those are kind of the other support networks that we see on tour with the team managers and a lot of cross-pollination between, Channel Islands team riders, spending time together, comparing notes, or JS team riders, etc. If you're working with similar shapers and on similar templates, for sure, once the singlet goes on, there's no friends in the water. But everything outside of that, I think everyone's as open as they can to getting the most information they can.
And just to add a little extra 2 cents before we get on into our next question, obviously a great question, but I would actually say that with the format change for next year with no elimination round, this might change actually, because you're probably going to see a lot more surfers already have to face off against each other from the very first round. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some changes in that sense, and I think it's a total possibility. But excellent question. Our last one, Dave, at Rory_Evans1. Will forehand power surfing win Gabby a world title, or does she need more variety? And emphasis on forehand because our finals are in Fiji, a left-hander over there at potentially Cloudbreaker restaurants.
Yeah, it's good to zero in on that. It decidedly will not win her a world title if that's the way it goes. But we've talked about it throughout the podcast, and that in a way, a false tension at the CT level between power surfing and progressive surfing, if you want to oversimplify it. I think Gabriela's approach, forehand and backhand, is pretty progressive. You can see her loose the fins quite a lot. And I would even argue that lines that certain surfers take can be progressive. Katie Simmers, for sure, very impressive in the air, very impressive when she looses the fins. But I would say almost the more progressive part of her surfing are the really unique lines she takes to waves. We see it in wave systems, we see it, in the barrel, we see it on just really beautiful waves that have great canvases. And a similar comp would be someone like Ethan Ewing. I think the lines that Ethan takes are very progressive as well. And Ethan can do the airs, he can lose the fins, but not that I reject the premise of the question. I think it's a really good one. I think forehand power surfing and power surfing in general has done so much for Gabriela Bryan. I think it cannot be overstated how impressive it is that she has really filled a Carissa Moore level vacuum on tour with her approach. And I think it's notable that those two traveled together for years as well. And I think that helps a lot. And so I don't know. I'm not really answering the question, but I think power surfing is definitely gotten her to where she's at. I think when you look at reef passes like a Cloudbreaker or restaurants, power surfing will rule the day out there as well. And her backhand's really impressive. But, Mitch, what do you take out of that question?
For me personally, I'd say yes at this point. It's going to qualify her. She can't win just based on that over in Fiji, of course. But if she is the number one surfer heading into the Lexus WSL finals, I feel like she's the one to beat. The one question we haven't really seen answered is if she can barrel ride going on the backhand. And
right.
It really depends on how big it is over there, either Cloudbreaker or restaurants. Personally, I want it to be at least 6 to 8 feet. I think it's a level playing field when we see that. But the question to me is going to be answered if we have pumping Tahiti. Can you make it into the semifinals or better over there? Obviously not the same wave, a lot of differences and variables in both locations, but there is a certain variable that is always present in both of them. You need to be under the ledge, really, for the most part, to catch these waves when it's barreling. So I think her power surfing is getting her there. She already made the final in Portugal, a really tricky event. It's a beach break that moves around a lot. I think if she does the same thing over in Brazil, she's going to be the one to beat for the World Championship. But that's why I still feel like the likes of Caitlin Simmers and Molly Picklum are the ones that you kind of want to have on that pedestal too, because they can do everything. And if you look at their careers in the last 3 years, they've been excellent in all types of different conditions. And I think that's going to be another venue where they both excel. I'm getting on the board with Gabby, though. A lot of my coworkers have said that she's their world champion at the end of the season. I'm not fully there yet, but I think I'm close to it.
Well, it's a great point when it comes to Fiji because she's only competed out there once, and that was last year. It was smaller conditions, but she
with
went
an injury
down
too.
With an injury, but she went down to Aaron Brooks, right, with a 9th, missed out on the top 5. So I'm sure there's something to in the back of her brain that she wants to correct there. And you're totally right. Like, you can look at the next 4 venues. You've got Trestles, primarily a right, good left-hander too, but we see most of our scoring rides on the right. Sakurama, beach break, can be a left, can be a right, up in the air. J-Bay, maybe the best right-hander on the planet. Tahiti, slabby left-hander. So we'll get to see, a full approach to Gabby's sort of bag of tricks there. And then, we'll see what happens in Fiji for sure. I think it's interesting with both our front runners now. I wonder, Mitch, if you think if they continue to be front runners, are they trying to get over to Cloudbreak, before the end of the year to get some time out in that lineup and kind of work on different equipment, work on different approaches to that wave?
Well, it depends on when you have time.
That's right.
And at what point do you say, okay, I know I'm pretty much a lock in, whether it's number 1 all the way through 5. If you feel like you're there already points-wise, I'd say yes. And I know, Jordy is definitely one of those guys that would at least put in a week over there.
Right.
Gabby, at this point, I feel like she should be prepping, honestly. I don't see her losing out before the quarters at any of the next 4 events, and that's even in Tahiti. But, if it were up to me, I'd put in at least, 20 to 40 hours if I could over there at one of those breaks.
The time question's a great one, right? Because we've just finished the GWM Aussie treble. Trestles starts on the 9th. That goes to the 17th. And then we go to Sakurama. That starts on the 21st. That finishes the 29th. It is a much easier flight getting from Brazil to J-Bay than pretty much anywhere else. So I'd imagine, especially in the case of Jordy, he's going to head to his home country a little bit earlier. I think that window, if I'm either of them, is post J-Bay, pre-Tahiti.
Yep.
You get about 2.5 weeks. You can justify it that you're training at, left-hand reef pass. I think if you are in the Cloudbreak area between July 20th and August 7th,
you're getting waves.
Keep your eye out for some of the WSL Final 5 members coming out there. So.
Yeah. No, for real. No, but it's a good point. Like, that right now, it's the last time we have this format. If you're number 1 in the world, you got to be thinking, okay, like, I'm probably the front runner right now to take that spot heading into the final. So am I sacrificing time away from home to do this? Of course I am, especially if you're scoring waves too, which is the most consistent part of the year.
Yeah. Well, right on. Thanks to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod. The Lexus Trestles Pro presented by Outerknown is starting on June 9th. We've got our first CS event, the Newcastle Pro, happening before that. We got South Swell. They're lining up. I'm excited to get down to Lower Trestles, catch up with you in person, Mitch. And yeah, thanks to all of our listeners. And yeah, we'll be back soon.
Thanks, guys.